comic books are an important contributing factor in many cases of juvenile.
Up in the sky!
Faster than a speeding bullet.
Holy, here we go again.
Hello and welcome to These Guys Have Issues, the podcast where we discuss current topics and issues within the comic book community. But today this podcast should really be called This Guy Has One Issue, because it is just me here in the studio today. Mike is still under the weather, but I wanted to make sure that we got some thoughts about the Captain Marvel movie out there into the world. So here we are. I do want to thank our sponsor today, Mitchell Troxel. We appreciate your help in allowing us to be able to have this podcast tonight. Without him, it would not have been able to happen, so a big thank you to Mitchell. Also, another quick warning before we go any further. This review will contain spoilers, so if you have not seen the movie or you want to go into it spoiler-free, stop me now, pause me now, come back later after you have seen it. So, spoilers aplenty from here on. So the first thing I want to talk about, and just really to kind of get rid of the elephant in the room, and I don't want to spend much time on this because it doesn't deserve it, but the controversy going into the movie before it was even released. Any kind of preconceived notions that someone brought with them into the movie are simply not there, really. And the only way that you would see some kind of agenda behind a movie like this is if you brought those views already into the movie theater with you. That's really all I have to say about that. Let's move on to the actual review now. So my overall knowledge of Captain Marvel, and specifically Carol Danvers, going into the movie was fairly low. Low to none. I knew that's where Rogue gets her powers from, and that Captain Marvel, was really Miss Marvel, that she gets her powers from Mar-Vell, who is the first Captain Marvel in the Marvel Universe. So that being said, I think the comparisons to the Wonder Woman movie are really only there because it happens to be two female-led superhero movies. Other than that, the two characters aren't really comparable at all, in my opinion. In fact, I think Captain Marvel is much more comparable to Supergirl than she would be to Wonder Woman. Captain Marvel is Carol Danvers, while Supergirl is Kara Danvers. And they're both, they both have male analogs. Supergirl's being Superman, Captain Marvel / Miss Marvel being Mar-Vell, or Captain Marvel. So I kind of thought that was interesting going into it. Now, things that the movie does really well. Brie Larson is excellent, for one thing. She carries the movie flawlessly, really. So I love the overall message of the movie that, Danvers, or Veers, as she is called through the first half. She's kind of being told what she can't do, what she is not capable of. Whether she's with Star Force or as a pilot in the actual Air Force. They were only allowing her and Rambeau to be test pilots. So her limitations are constantly being set for her until she, gets rid of the chip thing in her neck that was implanted there by the Kree as a power inhibitor. So only once she frees herself of that is she able to unlock her true potential, her true power, and is really set free. So I thought that overall kind of arc, the movie succeeded. In displaying that to the audience. The most enjoyable scene in the entire movie, in my opinion, is the chase scene after Coulson and Fury discover Danvers when she's crashed into the blockbuster. There's so many things that are working well in that scene. The car chase had this really great 70s cop show feel to it. In my opinion, fights on trains always work. I can't really recall seeing that in a movie and thinking that was a flawed or wasted scene. They're somehow always fun. And Captain Marvel does a really good job of adding a new twist with Danvers being able to, blast a hole into the top of the train and sink back into it. Also in this scene, the twist of it not being Agent Coulson in the car, that's an actual Skrull, I thought was excellent and is a great moment to show Captain Fury that, there are more things in heaven and earth that are dreamt of in his philosophy. So overall, best scene in the movie to me. I would watch that scene over and over again. I also thought the movie did a great job of mixing up the Skrull-Kree dynamic. As a fairly basic knowledge Marvel person, I'm kind of conditioned, or the stereotype that the Skrulls have are as bad guys to me. And they even look like bad guys, or they look like the usual bad guys we would see in sci-fi movies. They're the little green men. But this movie doesn't let them be the bad guys. There's a pretty good twist. But this movie, took those preconceived notions of mine and surprised me in a good way. And really, I guess this kind of goes down to Ben Mendelsohn, the actor who is Talos, the Skrull commander here on Earth. He has a line that he tells, I think it's Fury, towards the very beginning, where he says, "Now you can't trust anyone." And as soon as he said that, in my head, I'm like, oh, okay, that's the bad guy. It's Ben Mendelsohn, who's played the villain in a ton of franchise movies lately. So why not cast him as the villain in this? And that's just a line that is normally delivered by the exact person that you can't trust. So when it turns out that he actually is, on the side of good in the movie, again, surprised in a good way. And in fact, nothing in this movie is really what it seems. The little green men aren't really the bad guys. The good-looking leading actor isn't the good guy. And the cat is not a cat, much to Nick Fury's dismay. Okay, so now for just a few negatives. I've talked the movie up a good bit there. There were a couple issues with it, in my opinion. To me, the biggest issue is that it is hard to identify with Veers before the crash into the blockbuster. In the opening already takes place away from Earth, so we're kind of removed from our element, and we know that Veers has these memories that she's trying to get back, but there isn't like a real sense of longing or a kind of fish out of water experience. She doesn't feel like a person who is grasping for her identity. And we know that it's not just because it's big and spacey and cosmic-y, because Guardians of the Galaxy was able to make you identify with Peter Quill right away. Now, I think that has to do with a level of charm and a level of humanity that Quill has that Veers, without her memories at the beginning of the movie, just simply doesn't have. So I think that lack of emotional resonance hurts the first half of the movie, but once she crashes into that blockbuster, the movie really gets rolling from there. Another small issue was I thought some of the CGI was actually kind of shaky in the movie. Agent Coulson looked a little plasticky in his parts, especially compared to Sam Jackson's Nick Fury, who to me looked excellent throughout the whole movie. I would have totally bought that was an actual person and not a CGI rendering to make them look younger. The CGI for Goose, the cat, was not good. I'm not sure if it's because you're trying to put all these tentacles and stuff coming out of a cat's mouth, which sounds very difficult in and of itself, and jarring. It's visually jarring anyways. And then just adding CGI to it makes it look computer gamey or video gamey to me. those are basically the only negatives I have, though. The gag with Goose, was great. Him eating the Tesseract, all the way into the after credit scene where he coughs the Tesseract up on Fury's desk. All that stuff landed really well. A missed opportunity for a gag, I felt, was Nick Fury's eye. I thought there were going to be more moments where Fury was close to losing his eye, but it didn't happen. Similar to if you ever have seen the movie Hot Tub Time Machine, there is a character who, in the very beginning of the movie, when they're in this hotel, is missing an arm. And then they go back in time, thanks to their hot tub time machine, back into the 80s. And that same bellhop who is missing an arm is a bellhop at that hotel back in the 80s, but he has both arms. So the whole movie, you're waiting to see, where does this guy lose his arm? And he's doing crazy things like juggling chainsaws for an ice sculpture. And his arm gets stuck in vices and stuff, and it's a hilarious gag. And I was really kind of expecting to see more of that with Fury's eye. But overall, it's a good movie. I would see it again. I would recommend it. It's a mid-level-ish Marvel movie to me. I enjoy it more than the Ant-Man movies. But yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I would not be surprised at all to see Captain Marvel as the linchpin for the cinematic universe heading forward, especially after Endgame. She seems to be a central character that they're going to, you got to have a captain, right? And I'm kind of getting the feeling that something not so good might happen to Captain America in Avengers Endgame. So replace a captain with a captain sounds like something Marvel Studios would plan now. So that's all my thoughts about Captain Marvel here. We might get Mike to record something like this just to get his thoughts out there as well. I'm sure some of his thoughts might be a little different than mine. And we will see you next week where we have a very special show. Mike is going to be back in the studio with us, along with two other friends of mine who have told me before that they don't care for the character Superman, but had never read a comic of his. So I gave them two different graphic novels to read and see if those potentially change their opinion. So we're calling the episode The Problem with Superman. So be sure to look out for that next week in your podcast feed. But I have been your host, Carter Hutchison. This has been These Guys Have Issues. And we'll see you next week, kiddos.
This has been a Grassroots Comics production. Da da da. So what's your story?
Well, some kind of silly cartoon.
You got a problem with cartoons?